Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual town hall. I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman. I'm here with Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal. And we have a town hall tonight where we're going to be talking about small business, one of the most hard-hit sectors of our economy has been our small businesses. But first, of course, and foremost, COVID-19 is primarily a public health crisis, and the numbers remain extremely sobering. New York reported 13,869 deaths from COVID-19 as of this morning. There were 507 new fatalities in just the last 24 hours, 507. Yet in the midst of this tragedy, there are some promising signs that the worst is behind us. Key indicators, including net hospitalizations, net intubations, and the 3-day average of hospitalizations are down. The next phase of the COVID-19 crisis, though, is going to be economic. And we're already seeing major impacts on the economy. 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment. That's larger than the entire population of the state of Florida. In New York, the Department of Labor is facing an unprecedented surge in residents filing for unemployment insurance. 1.2 million New Yorkers have successfully filed for unemployment, and thousands more are continuing to call every day trying to get these benefits. One of the statistics from the Department of Labor is that they're getting up to 1 million inquiries a day. It's clear that once the public health situation stabilizes, our next priority is going to have to be economic recovery. And I'm thrilled that Assemblymember Rosenthal and I have 3 experts today to help us understand what comes next for our city. Comptroller Scott M. Stringer, Jessica Walker, President of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and Rachel Van Tosh, the Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. We also have with us John and Andrea here as our ASL interpreters for the first time. Thank you very much for joining us. Now I'm going to turn it over to my Upper West Side colleague and friend, Assemblymember Linda B. Rosenthal. Linda?
Hi, thanks, Brad. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. We thank you to our special guests for appearing here tonight on Facebook Town Hall. So we started this series of town halls on Sunday evenings, and this is our 5th virtual town hall. So far, we've heard from disease specialists, mental health professionals, and doctors in our hospitals. And tonight we're going to be discussing the experiences of businesses and that have taken a hit due to the pandemic, details of the city and federal relief programs, and how the economy can be opened in who knows when, hopefully soon. So everybody is fearful about the effects of this economic catastrophe, and hopefully our guest tonight will help us see a brighter path forward. Our first guest is Comptroller Scott Stringer. He's the city's chief fiscal officer and watchdog. He's been shining a light on the needs of the most vulnerable communities in this COVID-19 pandemic. He's been championing comprehensive measures to support small businesses at all levels of government and leveraging his office to deliver direct services to businesses and residents alike during this public health crisis. He also preceded me in office. So he was the assembly member before I became the assembly member, and I had big shoes to fill. So Comptroller Stringer, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Well, thank you, Assemblywoman. And let me just say to everyone listening tonight that Senator Hoylman and Assemblymember Rosenthal have really done us proud in Albany and in the district, advocating for the people who are struggling, even before the COVID pandemic. Brad Hoylman and Linda Rosenthal were always thinking about small businesses and taking on landlords who thought that the only thing we should have in neighborhoods are drugstores and big box stores. They were way ahead of their time on this. And I'm really glad to partner with both of them. They're amazing public servants. And the panel that you have tonight are really experts in the field, from the city administration to the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm glad to be able to step in here. I've tried to score an invitation to the Sunday night town hall meeting. And finally, I have my moment, so I'll get right to the point. Even before the crisis, our office, Comptroller's office, highlighted the fact that over the last 10 years or so, we went from having some 6 million square foot of office commercial space vacant to over 11 million. Truth is, small businesses were getting strangled through the city bureaucracy. The fact that we had city agencies that enforced bureaucracy, not helping to navigate these small businesses. I always make the point that when I was Manhattan Borough President, all the politicians, myself included, loved to cut the ribbon of the small business. But once we walked away, city agencies would come and tax them and fine them and just put them in a very precarious situation. They have struggled for years. And now the COVID epidemic has shut them down. And we as a city are gonna have to do two things: continue to fight the virus, because we're not finished yet. Senator Hoylman's right, there's better indicators, but we continue to have to social distance and think about the virus every day. But we also have to think about how we're gonna turn our economy back on. And we can't just open it up the way we closed it. We have to be very strategic. Part of turning the economy back on will be how we are able to leverage federal stimulus dollars, working with our state officials to make sure we have resources to reopen and then protect our small businesses. Look, some are going to never open again, and that's a tragedy. But there's a lot that we must save if we're going to bring New York City back to life. 2 points I just want to make about what the small business means. For many people who are getting their groceries delivered, it's not just Amazon or Fresh Direct. A lot of the people who are delivering groceries in this city are frontline workers. They wear a mask, they come to dormant buildings, they leave groceries. We are never going to know who they are. We can't say thank you to them, but they're literally risking their lives every time they come into a building. They have to be protected. So do the nurses and the doctors and the people who are literally sacrificing their lives to some degree as we get taken care of. So I do think whether it's a small business or frontline workers, we do need to have a national COVID protection plan so that we can pay into a fund that will allow us, like we did after 9/11, to protect the families of these frontline workers. And then we have to make sure that the stimulus that we're getting from Washington isn't just a stimulus that supports the large corporations. I saw one article that showed the average big wealthy CEO or someone in big business will get about $1.6 million in stimulus, as opposed to a frontline worker who will get $1,200 or an average citizen. So in future stimulus packages, we need all hands on deck to bring not just real rent payments to communities, but also to make sure the stimulus has a real small business plan, not just a loan program to pay back rent to wealthy landlords, but we're going to have to come up with a forgiveness program as a way of getting the economy open. And I hope we're going to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. And first, I'd be remiss, and I know Linda has at our previous town hall already extended her and my deepest condolences to you and your family for your loss.
Thank you. My mom is very well known to many of your constituents, because when I was running for assembly starting out as a kid, she was a fixture on 86th Street and 72nd Street, and she really loved this neighborhood that you represent today.
Well, thank you very much. Assemblymember Rosenthal dedicated actually our last town hall to her memory, so I thought that was.
She loved Linda.
Yeah. Well, since you can only be here for the beginning of this town hall, we were going to start with you. And half of New York City employees work at workplaces that have 100 or fewer employees. So small business is a big imprint on the city and on the state. And we've seen at the federal level, the CARES Act, the $350 billion that's been dedicated to the Paycheck Protection Program kind of dry up in just a few days. What are you hearing from small businesses at your level, Scott?
So there's multiple levels of small businesses, right? And there's some good news. There's a lot of small businesses that have the capacity to navigate the bureaucracy, the federal bureaucracy in particular, to get whatever program money is available, and they will be successful. Obviously, the pot of money is not big enough, and that's why we're going to have, I think, another more robust stimulus that has to be earmarked for large urban centers like New York. But I'm very concerned about the mom and pop business that doesn't have the capacity to navigate the Byzantine paperwork that needs to be done, the records that need to be kept, because no one, when you're in a small business, you're fighting paycheck to paycheck, rent to rent. You don't have a quote unquote consultant or a high powered lobbyist to access those dollars. So we've got to get granular in the city, and the city government has to step in and be the ones who can safely get our small businesses through whatever stimulus program becomes available. So that's step one. The second is this city has never been good to women and minority-owned businesses. Of the $20 billion spend on procurement, hiring law firms, accounting firms, food vendors, very few, 4.9% of those that spend goes to women and minority-owned businesses, MWBEs. So the city has never been friendly to MWBEs. We have fought for years to get those businesses a larger chunk of the pie, but it's like going through hoops. Now, we've got to make sure that these MWBs get paid special attention. And I want folks who are listening tonight that our Chief Diversity Officer, Wendy Garcia, as well as the City Small Business Administration and others are partnering now to have webinars every 2 weeks, Tuesdays and Thursdays, as a way of getting small businesses, businesses of women and people of color in particular, the information and the help they need. We just had our first webinar, and I have to tell you, in excess of 300 people came on. It was extraordinary. So, Senator, there's a real need for this, and we'll get you and Linda all the dates so that people can come on.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand you put together a great website, which is a one-stop shop for all things related to COVID-19 crisis. And I believe you have vital resources listed on that website.
So this is the staff in the Comptroller's office. Even though we are working remotely and we were the first city agency to get people out of harm's way, I'm very proud of that. But we have over 750 people doing their jobs from home, and through that, they have put together what we call the COVID Resource Center on our website, which is a handbook of everything you need to know, every resource that's available. We've sent it out far and wide, but obviously we need your help to disseminate the information. And essentially, we want this to be the place that sort of says, okay, what do I do? I'm a small business and I'm drowning I'm drowning now. I don't know where to go. I don't want where to turn to. So we developed this resource guide. And look, it's not our resource guide because we're relying on the good offices of city agencies. My job is to hold city agents accountable, but I also want to say we called them up and said, what can you do to help us with the guide? And they were right there. So I hope to build upon it with not-for-profit groups, advocacy organizations. Obviously, we're going to have to build this guide going forward, but I really hope that it will serve the public well.
Okay, Brad?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point out, Linda, that we're getting a lot of questions about unemployment insurance, and we just wanted to acknowledge that that we're going to try to answer those. But if we don't get the chance, please reach out to our offices. We'll be posting our respective email addresses and telephone numbers for you to reach out to us. Scott, it's been all too clear during this crisis that sadly we can't trust trust the federal administration. But states need the federal aid to help provide relief to everyone who's struggling through this, including small businesses. What do you think the federal government should be doing to support our small businesses, in addition to the PPP? What else could they be doing?
For some people on this call will remember the city's fiscal crisis back in the 1970s. Been a lot of articles written about how Republican President Gerald Ford told New York City to drop dead when the city had some real serious fiscal issues. And New Yorkers came together, we organized, and we went to Washington fighting federal loan guarantees. I've been rereading some of that history in the last few weeks, and we are now at an even bigger crisis because we're fighting something. Back then we were just fighting Republicans. Now we're fighting a virus and Republicans. I don't mean to be political on the show, but we all know the incompetence on a federal level. I think right now, whatever your political persuasion is, whatever your elective office, whatever your business, whatever your nonprofit or advocacy organization, no matter which Democrat you want to support for president, we have got to demand of all of our federal officials that we get a stimulus package that reflects the population and the seriousness of this virus. I remember when I was in the state assembly before Linda, after 9/11, and we literally had a battle, Republicans in the state Senate, to get our fair share of money for recovery back then, because they wanted to create programs in so many of these upstate communities, like in Troy, so that they could protect salad bars from a salmonella attack, as opposed to helping with the recovery in ground zero. That was actually a battle we had, and the same battle is today. If you are from Wyoming or some of these small states, where they've had 40 corona cases, they're getting something like $3 million per individual, when New York, which is at the epicenter of this, we're getting $155,000 per person. So this whole federal stimulus is out of whack. It's a political document. I do commend our our U.S. Senators Schumer and Gillibrand, because they have to deal with the reality of a president and a Republican Senate. But we have to help them now get the stimulus that's going to go to localities. So we need more aid to localities, to governors, and to mayors. I will tell you that we've lost between $6 and $8 billion in taxes to this city. We're in the hole. Our budget deficit is between 1.5 and 2 billion for this fiscal year. We'll get through that. The mayor outlined his plan, but next year it's very uncertain without a real federal stimulus package. We could be at $6-7 billion in deficit. So think about the fiscal crisis back in the 70s when we were on the edge of bankruptcy, and then compound what we're going through with the virus and that. And this is a time for organizing. And what you and Linda have proven to your constituents is, when it came to rent, you went and figured that out and got people protected. When it came to the people's budget, you were able to do that. And I think your constituents are going to be calling on you again to be the organizing engine federally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Before you leave, I just want to say your website again. It's Comptroller, comptroller.nyc.gov/services. But actually, I went and checked, and if you just go to your website, the COVID-19 button is right there. So thank you so much. Keep safe. Say hi to the boys. Scott's
By the way, they wanted to see Aunt Linda tonight, but they're in their room cleaning. And then they wanted to see Brad's kids, and I said, I assume they're cleaning. So so next time they'll make an appearance. Thank you,
All right.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Brad, you're up next.
I'm up next. And I wanted to once again introduce Jessica Walker. who is the president and CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, an organization that represents and supports the business community across the borough. Before Jessica joined the chamber, she was the vice president for government affairs at the Partnership for New York City, which is an organization that represents the city's major corporate employers. And Jessica and I were actually colleagues at the Partnership for New York City for a number of years. Prior to that, Jessica was a leading advocate for elderly New Yorkers. She currently serves on the board of directors of United Neighborhood Houses and is an appointed member of Governor Cuomo's Regional Economic Development Council for New York City. Jessica, we'd love to hear a few remarks from you about the current state of small business during this coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for putting this together. It's, as you can imagine, a tough time for everybody, and especially so for small businesses. So just to be clear, our chamber, we have about 1,600 members, but the vast majority are those small businesses who have, fewer than 100 employees. And there's no question about it that they are struggling right now. What we did when the pandemic really first started, we really saw that there was a lot of confusion out there. Most businesses did not know, it was really hard to follow all of the guidelines from day to day. Things were changing so quickly, what they had to do to protect their workers, and then of course, what help was available. So we really have been trying to educate. We always had a help desk available mostly to our members, but when this happens, we opened it up to any business in need in the city. And what that allows us to do is a business can call us with a question or a concern, or just they want to know what help is available, and we connect them to experts. And that allows us to help, but also to understand really what people are going through and what the big questions are. So happy to chat more about that tonight. The other thing I'll say is we also have been doing weekly webinars, trying to get the word out about changes, because as you'll hear tonight, as we really get into the weeds here of some of these programs, they are changing all of the time. So we've been trying to keep people up to date on what's happening. And then of course, the final thing we've been doing is a lot of advocacy. And that's all around just trying to make sure that as things are moving at the federal level in particular, that they are aware of how these programs benefit or, don't for small businesses.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce our other guest, Rachel Von Tosh. She's Deputy Commissioner, Division of Business Services at the New York City Department of Small Businesses. Rachel oversees initiatives to help businesses start, operate, and grow in New York City. And she provides, her division provides local programming in all 5 boroughs through a New York City Business Solutions Centers with a focus on helping businesses access the capital they need to improve their company. Rachel also oversees citywide initiatives such as We NYC and Small Business First. And thank you for being here, Rachel. Would you like to give a few remarks?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Good evening, everybody. I hope that we're finding you and your family as well and in good health this evening. That is the most important thing. Before I share some updates regarding resources for small businesses, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining tonight. As you know, this has been a very challenging situation for all of us, but the partnership and engagement of elected officials like Senator Hoylman and Assemblywoman Rosenthal has really made a huge difference, I think, in business owners being able to access the resources they need during this time. So thank you both very much. And thank you, Jessica, for joining tonight. I'll just highlight a few quick services that businesses can access through our agency right now, and then I'm happy to take any questions. So first, one of the things that we are doing to help businesses in this time is that we are helping essential companies find the employees that they need even though that there are many people who are unemployed at this time, there's also businesses who desperately need workforce. So we have been recruiting and interviewing and finding qualified employees for those companies that are open and are in need of that assistance. Second, we're providing free legal services to businesses to help negotiate with their landlords in terms of any concessions, in terms of negotiating rent. That is something that has been critical as many businesses remain shuttered during this time. And finally, as you mentioned, I oversee the NYC Business Solution Centers, which are still open, and they provide a whole range of free services. You can access them digitally, as well as our Workforce One centers, which are open virtually during this time. So I encourage individuals to go to our website where you can access those services online. We've been sending out regular updates about all of these services and the different opportunities, both ourselves and our partners through our mailing list, through social media and our various partners. So if you're not on that, I would encourage anybody to sign up, because we send out things very regularly there as the situation changes, like Jessica said. And I think if there's one thing to leave you with tonight, is that if you need help, please reach out. We are here to help guide you to any available resources, and you're not alone during this time, even though we are all socially distanced right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner. You know, I've been getting a lot of inquiries, and I'm sure the Assembly member has as well. I'll just share one briefly from a restaurateur in my neighborhood, where we have a lot of restaurants on the west side and east of Manhattan. He writes that he secured PPP funding for his restaurants, but he can't pay people to do nothing. So he's just forced to sit and wait for the crisis to subside and for the feds to adjust the rules of the PPP loans for the restaurant hospitality industry. Jessica, what are you hearing, and Rachel, from businesses directly? You must get a lot of inquiries on a daily basis.
Yeah, that particular issue we're hearing a lot about, and we've actually been pushing at the federal level for changes there. Basically, the way that it's the current PPP bill is written, you have to maintain employees through the end of, I believe, June, and then that's when you can start to get the forgiveness. The problem is, of course, that a lot of people, just as you said, if we're still not open, if the shutdown is still happening here at the city level, a lot of businesses, there's no reason for them to hire. And frankly, they won't have any income coming in still, so it doesn't make financial sense. So we've been pushing to say, can we push that period, that deadline, back to the end of the year to give restaurants more certainty and time to ramp up, and to make sure that they would still be eligible for the forgiveness, to have that loan forgiven.
And how are you advocating? Is it through just outreach to federal officials?
Yes, it's mostly a lot of direct lobbying to our elected officials at the federal level, but also we've been very successful at organizing. I think sometimes, we forget to work together, right? So one thing that I think we've really been successful at is a lot of different organizations who sometimes work together, sometimes don't, have really tried to come together to say, hey, we all have different concerns around what's happening, but there probably are 4 or 5 big ticket items that we all care about. And so what we've been trying to do is to really focus the attention on those big things. And of course, improvements to this PPP program are critical.
So small business owners, restaurateurs in particular, as I mentioned, they should reach out to the Manhattan Chamber.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, we have a help desk. It's not just about going online and reading about these different programs. It's also important to actually talk it through with a lawyer or some other expert to understand how it's going to affect your particular business. And so that's one of the services we offer, and SBS sounds like that they can offer as well, to try to help that business figure out what's best for them.
Absolutely. It is certainly a web of different requirements that you need to meet in order to both access, but more importantly, get forgiveness for the federal funding. And it's not always aligned with our on the ground experience in New York. For example, the PPP, you have to actually have employees on payroll for the 8 weeks following the loan, which right now may not make sense for many New York City companies. So making sure that you fully understand all of the requirements is extremely important, and having somebody either at a centers or at the chambers sit down and talk you through that, I would highly suggest it for any business owner who's looking at federal programs right now.
Thank you.
I spoke to a business owner who applied at a bank, and he got a text saying that he was in line behind 100,000 people. So he was like 100,001. I mean, I think all the federal money is gone already. Is that right? For small businesses?
So as most things go, it's complicated. So yeah, there was initially about $350 billion put in a Paycheck Protection Program, which is one of the programs that was created here. That money ran out last week, but we strongly encourage everybody to continue through that process, because it is a first come, first served process, but it's very likely that this week more money will be put into that program. So continue to apply, continue to go through that process. And then the other big program, which a lot of people have been working on, they call it EIDL, but it's actually the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And this runs through the Small Business Administration. That also has, they're starting to, that's starting to dry up as well. Looks like they're going to put some more funding into that as well. So continue to go through the process. Do you want to say more about that, Rachel?
No, I completely agree. We've been giving the exact same advice, that even though you see in the news that the funding is running out, we are hopeful and advocating for there to be additional funds. And so making sure that your application is in is very important. And if you do not have, we have found also that many lenders are working with existing customers, but there are some that are open to customers that they do not have a previous relationship with. So if you're finding yourself in a situation where you need to be connected to a bank, we're happy to help with that as well. I think that has been one of the more difficult parts. I think, Jessica, you've probably heard that as well.
Yes, and there are some, what we would say, non-traditional lenders. So that folks might want to look at. Again, that's the reason to speak with an expert here, but places like Square, Fundera, which is more of an online lender, which you may or may not have heard of before, but those types of lenders are definitely willing to work with companies that they did not have a pre-existing relationship with.
Right.
But what kind of interest rates are those kind of companies offering? Because for some of these businesses, it's unclear that they will be able to come back as hard as they try. We don't know what the future holds, even the immediate future.
For the PPP, if you're able to use the funding primarily for staffing, it can be forgiven. If it's not forgiven, I think it's a 1% interest rate.
Okay, and the online?
I'm sorry?
The online company, Fundera, and the other one? Do we
Anyone who is lending the SBA loans have to adhere to the SBA guidelines.
Okay, great.
So yeah, Rachel, could you describe what is available at the city level? I know there were some grants available to small businesses, and I know other municipalities have been awarding grants to small businesses. What we hear from our small businesses is like they really can't manage a loan at this point. Any prospects for those grants to be ramped up further?
So as maybe you know, and some of your constituents do as well, we stood up both a loan and a grant program very early on with the idea that we would help bridge to the federal funding, because frankly, as the controller said, the city budget is already getting hit, and we really need like the deeper pockets of the federal government in order to address this issue in full at the city level. But we did have a grant program that we closed just about 2 weeks ago now, that was aimed at helping very small employers, businesses with 1 to 4 employees, retain their staff for a few months. But that at this point is closed. We've awarded over 1,500 businesses at this point, about $13 million, and we'll continue to do that for businesses that were in our pipeline before it closed.
Jessica, are you hearing from private philanthropy about potential grants to small businesses? And could you also explain how your help desk actually works? Like, will you help a business navigate through these different applications?
Yes. So yeah, the help desk works by, you can email us at helpdesk@manhattancc.org or call us. I'll put that information in the chat in a minute, just so folks can definitely reach out to us by phone or email. And what we do is we connect you with experts. So sometimes it will be, putting you in touch with somebody directly at SPS. It could be with lawyers who volunteer for the help desk. We have many people that we work with, and so we'll try to make sure that you get all of your questions answered. And I do want to give a shout out also to Rachel and the team at SPS. I think the loans, the continuity loans, and what they did, the grants, they did that so fast, knowing that the #1 issue facing small businesses was going to be the cash flow issues. And so what they did was try to get money out the door very quickly as bridge loans to get them to what the federal government is trying to set up right now. And so, kudos to them. It's tough. I know that nothing's perfect, but it really, I think, has been helpful to a lot of businesses. It's true. And the other thing, you have to keep in mind, the PPP program, even though the money has already run out in this first phase, that $350 billion, that is bigger than the city and state budget combined. So, it is the federal government who has the resources here that we really need so desperately.
Yeah.
So, sorry, did I answer your question, Brad? I got lost there.
I guess I also are you hearing about any private philanthropy helping
Yes.
small businesses?
Sorry, yes, that was the question. The answer is yes. Tomorrow, the US Chamber is going to be launching a program for small businesses. These are going to be $5,000 grants, I believe, based on hardship. I encourage people to apply as soon as possible. But I think that it's well financed, well resourced, but of course, you want to be the first ones there. And then there are a lot of different companies that are starting to think about making grants. I know Verizon had a program. I don't know if that has been closed. Facebook said that they are going to be launching a program soon. So yes, this is something that it's an area that people are exploring, and hopefully we'll see more of that.
And does the chamber provide that kind of one-stop shopping to help find those grants?
Yeah, yes, we are pushing that information out as we learn about it. But yeah, it's happening. There might be things that we don't even know about, but those things that we do know about, we are sharing.
Great, thank you.
So we have a couple of questions from people watching this. One is from Veronica saying we need more than just PPP. We need loans to allow payment of business line of credit and vendors. What good is getting money to hire employees if the business has zero income and owes money because of COVID? That's one question. And the other is a little bit outside your areas, but I'll ask anyway, because we've heard this a lot. Small landlords are saying, what about property tax forgiveness? So first,
yeah.
Yeah.
So after the questions that we get around the federal financial aid, the biggest question after that is always about rent relief. Just because it's the biggest, after labor, it's like the biggest source of the biggest cost any business faces, especially in New York. It's very complicated, as you know. This is a complicated issue. So I've spoken with a lot of people in real estate, definitely spoken with a lot of people a lot of the small businesses and what they're going through. A few things. I think that we were looking at the issue of providing incentives to landlords, like property tax relief, in exchange for cutting their tenants a break. But it seems like it would just be so expensive with this to the city and state, where they're already hurting. So it's something that I think is being looked at, but I just don't know if the resources are there to do that. The other thing, though, I do want to let people know is that everybody knows that there's a huge crisis here, and nobody wants to, no landlord, no bank who, has mortgages out there wants to see massive defaults. It doesn't help anyone, right? So many lenders have already voluntarily cut a break to a lot of building owners. Sometimes it might be a 3-month forbearance, and that they could then turn around and provide relief to tenants. So what we've really been counseling people to do is to have a conversation with your landlord. Let them know, what's happening with your cash flow. Obviously, try to pay what you can, but if you're having trouble, communicate that with them and try to work something out. And I have heard many, good news stories come out of that.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. At this time, although we've heard a lot from business owners about property taxes, it's not something that has really moved forward in the city, given, as Jessica was saying, some of the expense issues, among other things. But on the second point about paying existing debts, my recollection is for the EIDL program, for the program directly with the SBA that Jessica was talking about earlier, you can use funds from that program to pay down debts that you have or outstanding invoices. So if that is something that is a financial burden on your company right now, that would be a good product to look at.
Okay, Brett?
Yeah. Are you hearing about the issue? And we've heard about it a lot as elected officials, business interruption insurance and the exclusions that apparently exist for viruses. Viruses are not viewed as physical damage to property. And I'm interested to know from the private sector and the business community, what's the approach? And then does the small business services have any strategy in connection with that? Jessica, do you want to take a shot? Are you hearing about this issue?
Absolutely. We've taken a strong stance. I think I mentioned this coalition that's come together. This is one of the big 4 items that we are very concerned about and are pushing and advocating around. So a few things here. One, for the most part, you're absolutely, I know Brad is a brilliant lawyer, so I know that this is there's a lot of fine print here. I think for most businesses, you're going to go, if you carry business interruption insurance, you want to file a claim as soon as possible. You will probably be denied right now. But what we are trying to do is to change that. After 9/11, they created a special fund to compensate people who were in this predicament, and it was pretty much funded, I believe, by the insurance industry. So it wasn't a total payout direct from the insurance company to the company who had the policyholder. But there was relief provided at the end of the day. So the most important thing to do is to make sure you do your paperwork, file the claim, even though it probably will be denied in the short term. But hopefully, we're advocating, many elected officials are advocating for some solution for those people who did the right thing, have been paying into this business interruption insurance for years.
Interesting. Seems one of the suggestions here is just be damned and file for everything as much as you can. Yeah.
Yes.
And Rachel, what's your take or your agency's take on this issue?
been advocating actually for Congress to consider legislation that includes this as a covered event under business interruption insurance. There is a precedent set for that after 9/11. So we've been advocating there, and we've also been advocating to the State Department of Financial Services, requesting that they mandate insurance companies to include COVID-19 as a covered event. We often will talk to businesses about the importance of having business interruption insurance. And so we have been really pushing to make sure that this is something that is covered for those who have actually gone that extra step to get that insurance coverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe the federal program back during 9/11 was called TIA.
I think that might be right.
A number of our local, including Congressman Adler and Congresswoman Maloney, advocated for.
Right.
So New Yorkers know about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think anything anyone can do about writing to their Congress members, that is always helpful.
And there are state bills in connection with this as well. But I think most people are looking at a federal solution.
That's right.
I actually worked for Congressman Nadler as his Manhattan director during 9/11 and the aftermath. And I remember the businesses that physically survived. What they needed was a grant. You know, the federal government said, we have all these loan programs, and they said, no, we need grants. And so we did manage to get grant programs. I think the same thing is true here, because the uncertain future of businesses, especially as people adjust to working at home, and that's a whole nother discussion. But I'd like to put in a plug for a website told to me by Ted Petrarchus, who's CEO of the Retail Council of New York State. There's a new website called Retail New York, spelled out, .com, retailnewyork.com, where businesses can list for free their business and website, and then customers can order. And it's a new effort, but I think it will be very worthwhile. When I order food, I go to a local market. We need to keep the small businesses, the ones that are allowed to be open, we need to keep them in good form and order. Even if you don't need that pancake mix, maybe try ordering it. But retailnewyork.com is a good website that people should check out, either businesses or people who wish to purchase. We have a question from Patrick. He's saying if a business did not get a city grant and applied to the city's 0% loan program, is there any hope of getting a city loan, or is that money gone as well?
We recently closed that program because it is very oversubscribed. We are continuing to process applications, and just last week we sent out a note to businesses that won't be able to move forward at this time. So I'd be happy to speak with that particular business to give them an update on their status if they want to leave their information, but it's hard to know without knowing the actual particulars of the case.
Right. It seems like, everyone's hopeful that the federal government will come through, but as we know, there's a bias against New York, which is, I don't even have the words for it, because we are a big economic engine here, not just in the state, in the region. So is there any thought that in New York City, your small business administration might have more funding for loans? And I know in the state where they're trying to come up with some great programs as well.
I think, as we were saying, or as mentioning earlier, we really envisioned this as a program that would get out early and bridge to the federal funding, because city businesses have been really hit hard, but we really need the federal level of investment to sustain it.
Yeah.
We're getting questions on Facebook. This is a really great question from John. What kind of legal support is there for businesses that can't take on an insurance company, or negotiate with a landlord. Do you have either resources available for that or direct pro bono support from law firms? I think there's probably a lot of lawyers, at least in different sectors of the legal business, who have some time on their hands. I'm wondering, are they helping out?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Rachel.
So we have a commercial lease assistance program that we run with a number of organizations across the city that provides free assistance to business owners that are looking to negotiate leases. We do that regularly, but we have certainly seen a big increase in need since the beginning of this crisis. And those attorneys will work with you one-on-one and negotiate directly with your landlord on your behalf. There are a number of other organizations across the city, like the City Bar Justice Center and the Neighborhood Entrepreneur Law Project and others, who have also stepped up in terms of pro bono legal assistance for businesses. That's been true also of a number of different law firms. But I know that those organizations, as well as our team, has been doing a lot of that work.
That's great to hear. So there is, in addition to your ongoing work, there's increased capacity now for this.
Definitely.
We have a question from someone who's a business owner or a worker saying, if so many of these workers are furloughed or laid off permanently, perhaps, what should they do? And I know you work with small businesses, but the people who made some of the small businesses run, what do you think they should do now?
I would say the number one thing is to apply for unemployment insurance.
That's another can of worms.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't. This is another area where the rollout was not perfect, and part of it, honestly, we're hearing that so many of the people who are manning the hotlines are working from home, so they're calling people back from their home phone numbers, and people are thinking it's a scam. So
right.
We're just hearing that it's a very confusing process right
Wow.
now.
Yeah.
But they.
Yes. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just going to say that it is something that the state is aware of, the governor's office is aware of,
Yes.
and they've been trying to make improvements there and try to get more of that money out the door.
But there, people who are self-employed, for example, first have to apply to the state and get turned down before the federal government will accept their application. Do you think there's any hope of that being changed?
This is, again, one of those guidelines that has changed. I heard last week that the state was doing, they had that unnecessary step that it wasn't a requirement for that to happen. So
Okay.
I do believe that starting this week, that will be streamlined, that's not going to be the case anymore.
Yeah.
So that would be something that would make it a lot easier. It's very confusing. Part of it, though, is it's combining two different programs. You have the state money, and then you have the new enhanced benefit from the federal government, which could provide. It's very generous, though. It's up to $1,105, I believe, per week, which is fairly generous, more than we've had in the past.
I think it's important to make the plug for, because we're hearing so much from small businesses that are dealing with their landlords, the whole cancel rent movement applies to commercial leases as well. And that would be legislation that both the Assembly member and I co-sponsor, that would suspend regular rent payments for 90 days for both residential and commercial tenants impacted by COVID-19, and instead require them to pay an amount of their rent that is up to 30% of their current income or contractual rent, whichever is less. It would also establish a rental assistance fund to provide relief to landlords impacted by reduced rental income. So it's one of those ideas that's picked up a lot of support, but we need more support from small businesses. We have 22 co-sponsors in the Senate. sure there's a lot in the assembly too. So encourage small businesses to call their legislators about that issue.
So I think we're almost at the end of our hour. Let me ask each of you, if you could speak to a small business person, what would you say to them in terms of your thoughts about the immediate future and the long-term outlook for them?
Listen, I would say first, they're not alone. Obviously, we've just heard there's so much frustration, and people are just trying to figure out what is going on, what help is available. So the first thing I would say is there is a lot of help out here. There's a lot of noise. So you want to just go to a source where you know you're going to be getting credible information. SBS, obviously, the chambers are helpful, but just make sure that you're getting that right information. Speak with an expert on what avenues you should be going down. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is to then do the homework about where you want to take your business through where we are, right? So you could be one of the lucky ones who gets your check tomorrow, but what are you going to do with it? How are you going to spend it? You have to be very smart about that in terms of staffing. Maybe you're going to pivot your business and go and do more things online. So you also want to just think that through too. It's not just the immediate get through this survival piece, although I know that that's really important, but it's also to think about the longer term, where you want your business to go, how you're going to use that money.
Okay, great. And Rachel?
I completely agree with that. I've talked to a lot of business owners during this time, and trying to remind them that they're not alone and that they can and should have hope has been really important, because the situation can seem very, very dire. And thinking about what you can do in this time period and what you can focus on, whether it's pivoting your business, whether it's reaching out to customers, like taking some tangible, actionable steps is very helpful, in addition to doing research, making sure you're reaching out to experts, and make sure that you are putting in applications for everything that is viable or could potentially help your business. Like, don't wait. I encourage everyone to just do that, because we're all hopeful that more resources will be coming, and you want to be right at the front of the line for those.
Well, thank you.
That's good advice, because shoppers like us are raring to go. And I'm sure, people will be very supportive once businesses open up. And, I know people just buying things. They may not need them. They may not, just to show support, because that's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And let me just add my thanks as well to the controller, to Jessica, and to Rachel, and to John for his sign language. What I'm taking from this is that we all have to be advocates too, and that in so many ways we have a template from 9/11, as Jessica and Linda both mentioned, in terms of how we organized with the city to fight for more aid for our small businesses and for our communities in general. So, I encourage everyone here to, particularly if you're a Manhattan small business, to reach out to the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, to get organized, to campaign for legislation that you think is going to help save our communities. And as we all know, it starts with small businesses on so many levels. So thanks everyone for joining us. This will be archived on our Facebook pages and on YouTube, and look forward to another conversation with you next week, Linda.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Thank you, guests.
Thank you for
you.
having us.